This photograph was taken in 1891. Two little girls, twin sisters, about 3 years old, stand side by side in a cramped Victorian parlor. They wear identical white dresses, identical boots, identical ribbons in their hair. At first glance, it's the kind of picture you've seen 100 times in old family albums. For more than a century, it sat in a cardboard box in a county archive, labeled only Twins, 1890s, Donor Unknown. Just another anonymous relic of the 19th century. Until an archivist scanned it and noticed something wrong. One girl is gripping the other's hand so tightly the knuckles are white. Her eyes are wide, wet, as if she's been crying. The other girl's hand hangs limp. Her head tilts at a strange, heavy ankle. Her eyes are off. The accession note, written years later, is only 4 words long. Right-hand twin, deceased. She had been dead for 3 days when the shutter opened, and no one outside that family had realized it until 120 years later. This is the story behind the twin sisters photo of 1891 and the mother who brought a dead child to the photographer so her daughters could still stand together one last time. Welcome to Veins of Darkness. To understand how a photograph like this could exist, we have to step back into the late Victorian world. The year is 1891. In Britain, the census takers are knocking on doors, copying down names by candlelight. Industrial towns sit under a permanent layer of smoke. Families crowd in 2 rooms above a shop or behind a factory. Children play in alleys where the drains overflow when it rains. Childhood is not safe. 1 in 5 children dies before the age of 5. Infectious diseases, scarlet fever, diphtheria, summer diarrhea sweep through streets and take the smallest first. Parents love their children no less than we do now. They just have to love them in the constant shadow of loss. Photography, by 1891, has become common enough that even working-class families will save for a studio portrait on special occasions. A wedding, a christening, a son leaving for the army, and sometimes a death. Victorian post-mortem photography was not a fringe practice. When a child died, and especially if that child had never been photographed in life, many families would arrange for a photographer to come to the house or bring the body to the studio. The child would be posed as if asleep, laid in a crib, propped in a chair, even stood upright with hidden supports. Parents might pose beside the body, staring straight at the camera, caught in that blank, stunned look of fresh grief. It was a way of saying they were here. They had a face. They existed. But the photograph we're talking about tonight is something rarer and darker, because in this case, there were 2 children, one alive, one dead, and a mother who could not bear to separate them. The family behind the image comes to us in pieces. A few lines in the 1891 census, a death certificate, a burial record, and a note scrawled on the back of a faded photo decades later. Their surname was Hollis. In the spring of 1891, just before the census man came to their door, Thomas Hollis worked as a joiner, a carpenter, in a Midlands town. His wife, Eliza, is listed as having children 3, living 2. It's a small but important detail. The 2 living children are twin girls, Ada and Alice, recorded as age 3. Twins carried a special weight in Victorian imagination. They were curiosities, whispered about as omens, joked about as double trouble. But for Eliza, they weren't symbols. They were just her daughters, mirror images, but not identical the way people think. Ada, the elder by minutes, is remembered in one family letter as the serious one, always watching, always holding tight to Alice's hand. Alice is the chatterbox, restless, fond of climbing into laps that are not hers. In early May of 1891, disease moves quietly down their street. Scarlet fever or perhaps diphtheria. The exact diagnosis on the certificate will later be smudged. The first sign is a sore throat, a hot forehead. Within days, there is labored breathing, a grayish cast around the lips. It is Alice who falls ill. The doctor comes, leaves a bottle of medicine that can't really cure anything, a mix of alcohol, opiates, and hope. He tells Eliza to keep the child cool, to offer sips of water. He does not say, but knows that many such cases do not end well. 3 days later, on a cold Tuesday morning, Alice dies in the upstairs bed she shares with her sister. The death certificate, signed that afternoon, notes, duration of illness, 3 days. Ada wakes up to a bed that is suddenly, terribly quiet. In most families, this is the moment when the script begins. Washing the small body, wrapping it in a sheet, arranging for the undertaker, for the tiny coffin. Victorian parents were heartbreakingly familiar with these steps. But twins complicate everything. To Eliza, the idea that one child should vanish from the bed, from the house, from the photograph on the mantel, while the other remains, is unbearable. She will later tell a relative, whose letter survives in a shoebox of family papers, that she could not marry them to separate fates. Either both girls will go into the future in images, or neither will. So, on the 3rd day after Alice's death, the day before the burial arranged by the doctor and the priest, Eliza makes a decision. She calls a photographer. He is a local man working out of a tiny studio above a chemist's shop. His name on the signboard is R. Winter, photographic artist, but his clients just call him Mr. Winter. He's used to solemn commissions. He's photographed dead infants before, arranged on pillows, watched over by stiff-backed mothers. It is sad work, but it pays. When Eliza comes to his studio, she brings only Ada with her. Not because she's changed her mind, but because she needs to talk. We don't have a transcript, but from Winter's later remarks to a journalist, we can reconstruct the shape of the conversation. She wants, she said, a likeness of my girls together, as they are, before the Lord takes the one away from me. When Winter gently points out that one is already gone, she shakes her head. She is not gone till she is in the ground.
He refuses at first. Photographing the dead is one thing. Photographing a dead child with her living twin in the same pose is another. There are practical concerns: movement, health, infection. There is also a boundary he feels, vaguely, in his bones. But Eliza insists. She tells him the burial is tomorrow, that she cannot live with herself if her twins are not together in at least one picture, that God made them arrive together, and that man has no right to separate them completely. Maybe he remembers the times his own children were sick. Maybe he needs the money. In the end, he agrees. The next afternoon, the Hollis family arrives at the studio. Thomas, grim-faced, Eliza, pale, clutching something wrapped in a white shawl, and Ada, holding tightly to her mother's skirt. Winter closes the door, draws the blind, and prepares the set. If you look at the surviving photograph without knowing any of this, it appears straightforward. 2 little girls, maybe 2 1/2, 3 years old, are standing in front of a painted studio backdrop that suggests a park. A railing, some vague trees. They are holding hands. They are dressed identically, white frocks with lace collars, dark stockings, small buttoned boots. Each has a ribbon in her hair. The light from the side window falls evenly on both faces. On the back of the card, in faint ink, someone has written, Ada and Alice Hollis, 1891. It is only when you stare carefully that the differences emerge. The girl on the left, Ada, is fully alive. Her eyes are wide and glistening, darting slightly off to the side as if she is watching someone just out of frame. Her free hand curls slightly, the tension visible in her knuckles. Her shoulders are not relaxed, they are rounded inward, protective. The girl on the right, Alice, is not quite like any living child you've ever seen. Her head tilts at an angle that is almost natural but not quite. Her eyelids are lowered, not fully shut, with the eyeballs fixed in a direction that doesn't match the other twins' line of sight. If you look closely, you can see a faint, unnatural line along the upper lid, the telltale mark of a photographer's pencil, where Winter has tried to retouch her closed eyes to look more like the open ones. Her mouth hangs slightly open, not in curiosity or speech, but in that slack way that doctors recognize immediately. Her right hand, the one Ada is holding, does not clasp back. Ada's fingers wrap firmly around it. Hers are straight, the way a doll's would be. Down at her feet, the skirts fall strangely stiff, hiding what we now know was likely a stand or brace supporting her from behind. To anyone who spends time around Victorian post-mortem images, these signs are obvious. But to an overworked archivist sorting hundreds of anonymous photos, they were easy to miss. In the decades, the photo sat in its box, face down. What finally changed that was not a historian poring over records. It was dust. In the early 2000s, the county archive began a digitization project. Volunteers and staff scanned thousands of fragile photographs, adding basic labels so that future researchers could search them. One day, a student volunteer placed the Hollis twins' photo on the scanner bed.
The first scan came out with a gray haze on the right side, the result of a long, greasy fingerprint that had lain there for who knows how many decades. The technician, annoyed, opened the image in editing software and began to clean. She adjusted the contrast. She deepened the shadows. She used a digital healing brush over the worst of the smear. As the background darkened and the hazy areas cleared, Alice's face sharpened. On the computer screen, her pupils appeared oddly dull, while her sisters caught the light. The retouching marks around the eyelids, invisible in the muddy original, became clear, little arcs of darker gray where the photographer had tried to fake a more lifelike gaze. The technician called over the project lead. They enlarged the faces side by side until they filled the screen. Everything the human eye tends to gloss over at first glance became impossible to ignore. The different way the light hit the skin, the lack of any sign of focus in Alice's eyes, the stiff wrist, the faint, unnatural bulge along her back where a stand must be pressing. On the back of the card, under the names, there was a line in pencil that no one had paid attention to before, half smudged out. One returned to God 3 days before. That sent the archivist into the records. In the 1891 death register for the town, there it was. Alice Hollis, female, age 3, daughter of Thomas Hollis, joiner. Date of death, 9 May 1891. Cause, scarlet fever. Duration, 3 days. In the burial book for the local churchyard, Alice is interred on May 13th. The studio logbook for R. Winter, preserved miraculously in a museum collection, shows an entry on May 12th. Mrs. Hollis, twins, special request, one child deceased. Put together, the timeline is clear. Alice dies on the 9th. For 3 days, her body is kept in the house, washed and dressed in the white gown that appears in the photograph. On the 12th, the day before burial, Eliza takes both her daughters, one living, one dead, to Winter's studio. He poses them. He takes the picture, and only then does the coffin close. We are left with a single question that no ledger can answer. What did Ada know?
She is 3 years old enough to form memories, old enough to know that her sister is not breathing, old enough to feel that the hand she is holding is colder than it should be. In the photograph, her eyes are wide in a way that suggests not surprise, but concentration, the intense inward focus of a child trying very, very hard to do what a grown-up has told her to do. Stand still. Hold your sister's hand. Look at the man. It would be easy from our century to condemn Eliza for putting her surviving child through this, to say she used Ada as a prop in her own ritual of denial. But grief does not move cleanly, especially not when it is doubled. Psychologists who study bereavement in parents of twins say that the loss of one twin is uniquely destabilizing. The surviving child is a living mirror of the dead, a constant reminder of what has been lost and what remained. In some cases, mothers will unconsciously conflate them, dressing them identically well past childhood, insisting on speaking of them in the plural. In 1891, there was no language for this. No therapy, only religion, custom, and whatever bargains you could make with yourself. Eliza Hollis's bargain was simple. If she could see her girls together in one photograph, standing side by side in their best dresses, then the world would not have taken Alice entirely. In her mind, the picture is not an act of horror. It is an act of mercy. R. Winter, the photographer, seems to have been troubled by it for the rest of his life. Years later, interviewed for a local newspaper about curious requests, he described a mother who brought me a dead child to stand with her living twin, and said, "I have made many post-mortem portraits, but that was the one that haunted me most." Ada appears in the records a few more times. She marries in 1910, moves to a nearby city, has 2 children of her own. There's no note in any official document about what happened to her memory of that day in the studio. Perhaps the photograph stayed on the mantle for years, its meaning shifting as she grew older. Perhaps she inherited it when her parents died and kept it in a drawer face down. Perhaps after she was gone, a grandchild cleaning out a house found it, did not recognize the names, and sent it to the archive as Old Family Photos Unknown. And there it sat until a scanner, a smudge, and a careful eye returned its secret to the light. The twin sisters' photograph is not the only Victorian image to hide the dead in plain sight. Sometimes the clues are subtle: a hand too still, an eye retouched, a stiffness in the spine. Other times they are right there, unmissable, if you know what you're looking for. In another image from the same decade, what appears to be a playful child reaching for a toy reveals under magnification something impossible lodged just beyond the edge of the frame, an anomaly that early photographers couldn't explain and that still disturbs modern viewers. We'll be looking at that one very soon. For now, remember this. Old photographs are not just pictures of what people looked like. They are records of what people could not bear to let go. In the Hollis twins photo, one child has been dead for 3 days, but to her mother and perhaps to her sister, she is still standing there, hand in hand, caught forever in that fraction of a second.
Thank you for watching Veins of Darkness. If this story has changed the way you look at Victorian photographs, if you'll think twice now before you assume every face in an old image was alive when the shutter clicked, consider subscribing for more journeys into history's darkest medical and photographic mysteries. Until the next macabre tale, stay curious about the darkness.